So we're going to present our project is building Wabanaki people's capacity to engage in salt marsh restoration. And this is our team. I'm Suzanna Greenlaw. I am a citizen of the Holton Band of Maliseet Indians. I have a postdoc at Schoodic Institute that focuses on Wabanaki-led salt marsh restoration just in Acadia National Park. I also work for the Wabanaki Commission on Land and Stewardship that focuses on land return, but my work is more on access.
Hello, everyone. I'm Genevieve Doughty. I am a part of the Sipayik Resilience Committee and a member of the Passamaquoddy tribe.
Why don't we just all stand up together?
Yeah, don't gotta be awkward about it. We're friends. My name is Kiwenik Lolar, part of Geeky, Kiwenik and Schoodic Indigenous Institute, and I'm a marsh bug.
Here, I have a mic myself. I'm gonna come stand over here. I'm Helena Tatgenhorst. I work at the Nature Conservancy in Maine as our coastal program manager, and I co-lead the Maine Tidal Marsh Restoration Network.
And then my name is Tatia Bauer. I'm the Marsh Restoration Program Manager for Maine Coast Heritage Trust, and I co-lead the network with Helena.
And we wanted to start with this framework initially of how we see this project and our work going, and we're really leaning into the ethical space of engagement. You know, we all have mentioned two-eyed seeing, and we're probably really familiar with that concept. So our approach to that two-eyed seeing is really sort of highlighting Indigenous knowledge frameworks and Western science frameworks separately, where there is education components on each side. You know, so the Western science component is really through education of understanding sort of the ontological and exological sort of like assumptions that we carry, so that when Western scientists come into the space of ethical engagement and co-production, that they come with understanding what assumptions they carry and how that produces harm or can perpetuate harm on a Native people, right? We know that two-eyed seeing often can be challenging of what science or what leads that space and how does Native people are not heard in those spaces. And for our Indigenous knowledge system space, that's where Native people are educated first on salt marsh history, restoration, and all of the tools and techniques that scientists are using. So when they come to the space, we're all at the same table. And we've seen this slide already, sort of the traditional territory for Wabanaki. You know, this slide for me really talks about what does Wabanaki homeland looks like, right? So our homelands are extensions of our landscapes of the inland and coastal. Currently, for the tribes within Maine, there's only one nation that has coastal property. I think in one nation just recently with a land return got an island, but there's no marshland, besides Sipayik, which has a very small sort of impounded marsh. So when it comes to access, we are mostly accessing private property or conservation landscapes. And there's a generational caretaking of these spaces. So salt marshes, this is where sweetgrass grows, and sweetgrass is a traditional spiritual medicine for us, and we weave it into our baskets, and it's very important to our culture. So we have generations of going to salt marshes to harvest, but we actually don't own that land, quote unquote. And early on, settlers modified these landscapes quite quickly. Salt marshes were really important for first settlers. They would identify salt marshes to put cattle on, and so they would hay those areas and modify them over 400 years of modification. So it's ditching, creating berms, getting the water to drain off to make it freshwater, more fresh water conditions so the grass would grow better, as well as excluding Wabanaki access to these spaces. And with this harm, now conservationists, but even restoration scientists are understanding the past maybe 40 years of what these ditches are doing. Before that, there was very little understanding of these big mega pools and these landscapes, if those were natural or man-made, were they causing harm? So even, as we know, restoration science is typically sort of a like on the ground, moving forward, iterative. And so restoration science has been happening in salt marshes for the past 10 years through learning and understanding. So there is an attempt to heal salt marshes, but there's still a legacy of exclusion, right? We know that restoration scientists have identified Wabanaki exclusion as an issue in these spaces without very little understanding of how to include sort of Wabanaki leaders in these spaces.
Oh, it's simple. So, current status. You can read it and we can walk away. That's not how it works. The current status with everything is, as you see today, and as Dr. Greenlaw said, it's sitting there in our faces and it's not really talked about. In Maine, the tribal nations have 0.1% ownership of the coastline. 96% is owned by private owners, conservation groups, so on and so forth. Our issue is access, safe access. I can share stories with people offline about trying to get sweetgrass in Camden in Korea and having guns drawn on me. We have tribal members who face that, and I'm not the only one who's heard that story. We also thought about with access, when we were going through this, what's the best way to go? Conservation groups are more willing to learn and work together. One of the problems tribal members have with that is they don't speak GIS, they don't speak ARC, they don't speak scientists. So when you speak to them on these matters, it ends up kind of going over their heads and they feel less valued, and then their knowledge feels less valued. So that's where we're at today. Again, Wabanaki knowledge is thousands of years old, but for some reason tribal members feel that it's less than.
Awesome. And then simultaneously, we have this really broad network of people through the Maine Tidal Marsh Restoration Network that have come together, largely non-Indigenous folks that are working together to share resources, to collaborate, to prioritize projects. But really at this point, there's not enough Wabanaki representation in that network, although they're stewarding marshes, they're accessing them for cultural sweetgrass. And so there's this disconnect. We have practitioners who are trying to restore salt marshes, who want to heal them for resiliency, for the longevity of these systems as ecological ecosystems. And the practitioners know that there's a gap with Indigenous engagement, but there's not really the knowledge or process or relationships that exist to allow that gap to be bridged. And the current process for restoration projects really don't authentically have a clear mechanism or framework to do Wabanaki engagement. And simultaneously, there's this pressure to restore these systems and to make the hydrological alterations that are needed for resiliency in these marshes without a lot of understanding how that's impacting sweetgrass, which is a big gap in knowledge. And the state broadly has over 20 active restoration projects that are done by land trust, federal agencies, state agencies, all across the coast. But only a few really have any Wabanaki engagement, and even less have Wabanaki leadership at the forefront. So here's a kind of map of what we now call Maine. All those black triangles are ongoing restoration projects that are listed through an ongoing database with the Atlantic Coast Joint Venture. The purple, I know shapes, purple diamond is ones where there's a co-stewardship model in place, or Wabanaki leadership. And then there are ongoing sweetgrass transplanting research projects that are ongoing, but those are at really early stages. And so just wanted to take a moment to, before we kind of go into the vision of our project a little bit more, recognize some of the existing efforts of bridging that gap. We have strategic planning that's ongoing in our Tidal Marsh Restoration Network that we hope to incorporate the vision for more Wabanaki leadership. We have First Light Learning Journey, which really works on teaching the colonial harm that has been, present for hundreds of years at this point. So to educate non-Indigenous people on all of that harm and how to move forward and pass and through that with partners. We have some Indigenous Wabanaki cultural and Indigenous cultural property, ICIP, work at Schoodic Institute, and co-stewardship at Acadia National Park through Bass Harbor Marsh, where there's some really awesome access and restoration work happening. And then again, more efforts throughout the state on cultural access through the We Commit program, and Suzanne's going to go into that a little bit more.
Right, so, we first know that access is important, right? We're not asking to do co-developed restoration without access first. So the effort of restoration is really in tandem with access work. So as Tatia just mentioned, this co-stewardship agreement with Wabanaki Nations and Acadia National Park also means access in Acadia National Park to sweetgrass. That's becoming finalized this year within tribal nations to the National Park Service. Wabanaki Commission on Land and Stewardship, we work on access, and so, for the state of Maine, we have very little federal lands, which we would have certain kind of access in federal lands. Most of it is private, and so 20% of that is conservation land, and the rest is private property. So it's either small landowners or large landowners up north. And we work through all of that land tenure systems to kind of find access opportunities. Currently, we have about 5 organizations where we have access opportunities. So the red is Appalachian Mountain Club. The red dots down below is Maine Coast Heritage Trust, who Tatia works with. The TNC is not on this map. This is one of the things that we're working through is when we get access opportunities, we also need their shape files. So we have access opportunities through TNC. The green is Bascahegan, which is a private small forest company, family owned. And then purple is Acadia National Park. And so this tool, we're using this map to communicate to citizens of where these access opportunities are. With TNC and Maine Coast Heritage Trust, we have a We Commit approach. So initially, our engagement for access was, they were giving us these permits, these cultural use permits, which put all of the work and the onus on the harvester to identify where, how much, when, and all this liability language that was kind of prohibitive of access, actually. Right, and so we pushed back and we really created this approach of more of a trust-based agreement where the work is put onto the organizations themselves instead of putting it onto the harvester, who actually has never been on that land before. So when they were being asked to tell them where and how much, they couldn't answer the sheet itself because they had never had access there. So this actually just opens up lands and through a trust-based relationship and with consistent forms of access and communication among all the land trusts in Maine who are going to sign on for We Commit. And there's a lot of interest in the We Commit approach. So when we think about kind of a co-development of restoration, these are on the access properties that we already have these agreements with. And hopefully that will just grow.
So much like our eel relatives, we are gathering together and grouping together to look at the opportunities that we hope to ignite and to enact, I guess, in our communities. So one of our greatest concerns is that Wabanaki people have safe and restored access to salt marshes and are seen as critical leaders to engage in restoration projects. We don't have that right now. It's limited. We have a lot of people doing amazing work, and it's just not highlighted. It's not seen. So that's one of the things that we really hope to accomplish here and really have meaningful engagement and thoughtful partnership.
Hey, it's me.
Sorry.
So with everything in our lives, it's not so much linear, it's cyclical. So right now we're working with Wabanaki Restoration Partner Cycles. And with that, it's been a partnership thus far. For Wabanaki people, partnerships don't really mean a whole lot. It's linear. It's got a start date and an end date and it's over. The grant's done. Bye-bye. See you later. Right now we're working on turning that into a relationship, and there's no end to a relationship. With relationship building, we're going to develop a sense of understanding purpose and set project goals and outcomes moving forward. And that's not just the non-Indigenous side or the Indigenous side. That's also the grass, the animals, the microbes that are in the land. They speak for themselves. We give them agency as Indigenous people, and non-Indigenous researchers are starting to understand that. That's why we're working together and forming these relationships. As you can see, Suzanne's talked about First Light. Several of you have been through some of their trainings. As part of your first year of doing this is we're gonna hopefully get a liaison whose job is to maintain this relationship. Everybody's super busy. If you've ever worked with any tribal community, capacity is always maxed out. We need somebody to take care of that. And then also somebody who speaks the language between the two parties, and then the three parties, because it's gonna take time. Those are really challenging, but anybody who's really found a spot in this land that they love, they know it's worth it because they've formed a relationship with it. They are part of the land, we are part of the land. And we're caretakers, and the next generation will be as well. Hey, there it goes. Capacity building. Again, we need somebody who's working GIS, somebody who speaks to tribal governments, somebody who's able to go down to the nonprofits and maintain these relationships and bring forward everybody's thoughts and feelings. But also at the same time, we need to protect each other's data and everybody's understanding in this whole cycle of life. For us, it's sweetgrass. No, it's not just sweetgrass, it's everything. We have a responsibility as Indigenous people to take care of these lands because they've taken care of us for thousands of years. And to use the modern tools of today, that's why we have researchers joining us. And we're hoping to form, like I said before, a relationship. One of my elders once said, use their tools, not their intent. And that's what we're doing.
So Kyle shared with you a little bit about the first two pieces of the work that we see moving forward. First, that relationship building and capacity building. We plan to spend the first year of this work focusing on relationships, meeting with the many different groups of people whose knowledge and understanding we want to be a part of this process, and that capacity addition of having a liaison to help with those conversations will lead to building a new framework and a new way of doing marsh restoration in a way that does authentically and ethically engage Wabanaki communities in marsh co-stewardship. And so this is a key piece that we see coming out of those first years of relationship building and capacity building. Developing this framework to do marsh restoration in a new way, working with both the restoration community and with the education piece and with the Wabanaki community and understanding how to work together in a different way than is happening now, because as we explained to you earlier, it's not happening. That connection is not happening, even if it is. Even if people are looking for it and want it to happen currently. And the idea for this framework, next slide, thanks, is that it will lead into implementation of a new way of doing things. So the last piece of our project is implementing a pilot project that has an Indigenous and non-Indigenous project team that moves at the speed of trust and co-manages a restoration project from start to finish. We will use the lessons that we've learned from, thanks Shoshana, from the beginning parts of the process to implement this project in a way that does, that can be learned from and worked into future projects. I'm not going to go through all of the numbers here, but we have split this into two different phases. The first phase is really about the relationship building and capacity building. 4 of our 6 project members do have funding from our own organizations to participate in this work, but it's really important to us that the 2 people who were able to be funded for their time through the Peregrine Accelerator, we need to find funding for them to be able to continue that work with us. The other funding in the first year really includes us hosting listening sessions with those many different groups that we talked about, with Wabanaki communities, with the Marsh Restoration Network, having conversations on the land with people in person, And that culminates in a gathering where we do bring everybody together. It was really interesting seeing the Eels Back project and seeing that shared idea of hosting a gathering, of bringing people together on the land is very important. Within the first phase, it also includes forming a Wabanaki Data Trust and hiring that liaison position that we talked about that would help guide this process. Because we all come from 6 different organizations, we are working together on this group, but we all have other projects that we work on as well. And so having that person that is focused just on this project is very important. And then finally, the beginning of the first phase is planning for the pilot project. And then the second phase is continuing team funding for the folks on our team who are not funded by their organizations to do this work, and doing the implementation of the new framework that we use for marsh restoration, and continuing that full-time liaison position. And I'll turn it to Jen to talk about what are the potential outcomes we see with this work.
So, thank you. So some outcomes that we would like to see are authentic relationships developed between Wabanaki people and practitioners. We want to have data protection tools and expanded cultural access to salt marshes, educational tools and experiences for partners, a lasting framework for co-management of marsh restoration projects. And all of this seems like maybe not too much, but I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot. We're reaching far. But we know also that we are able to do this, and that it just may take a little time, but these are the outcomes that we would like to have from this project.
Just to kind of reiterate about our team, and what Helena said was that we are 6 people from individual organizations. So it's not one organization doing this work, but I think that's our strength, is that Tatia and Helena are already in a marsh network with over 100 practitioners, and they're bringing people together, sharing information, but there's no Wabanaki inclusion in those spaces. And then there's parity also in this group, right? We have half Wabanaki, half non-native, and the Wabanaki crew is all involved in salt marsh work as well. But we need something more to help us bring together. We need a liaison position, we need somebody networking and making something that's more than what one of us can create. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Incredible presentation, and I love to just hear more about the Wabanaki on the other side of our imaginary line. Please invite me to any gatherings that you have. I want to be there. As sort of coming from the settler conservation side of a very, very similar partnership of multiple nations and communities and conservation groups, I have two quick questions. One is, once your community members and the folks you work with on the Wabanaki side have access to marsh restoration sites for harvesting, does that come with any other harvest rights? Like, for example, if you're in Acadia National Park, do those rights spread to, you have the rights, sorry, that's a poor wording, but once those agreements have been signed for access, can you access other medicines or plants or culturally important things? And then the second part is, how do you share that information? We're trying to open up access to the lands that we care for Wabanaki nations to use and harvest from, and even just be in, and how we share that so people know where to find it and what is available. I just curious about how you've managed those.
Yeah, so our access in Acadia National Park and the other federal park in Maine, which is Katahdin Woods and Waters, is really under their sort of different rules and regulations. So unfortunately, we worked under a plant gathering agreement. I worked to get the access there, and in that plant gathering agreement, there's an EA requirement with a finding of no significant impact. Initially, we just did focus on sweetgrass because we were kind of in the beginning of doing that, but our next step is to open that up to more landscape. Trying to push their policies and trying to understand how we can get as much access as possible in these landscapes. We currently harvest spruce root and other things there under a research permit. not great. So communication is something we work at as well for the commission, and we are developing a sort of a private citizen portal where they can have access to those maps and information, so that that information can stay private just for tribal citizens, because we are concerned once these become public, what is the general public response? You know, as we know for in Acadia, once the sweetgrass story became public, there's a lot of non-Native people emailing the park asking to watch. Right, they were like this idea of like, can we watch Native people? Do we know where it is? Can we go see it? You know, so this is really it's really important for us to stay private, or to share more of our frameworks and less about the individual grass and relationship itself. You know.
Yeah. Also, thank you for that wonderful presentation. So in the beginning of the presentation, I saw that there was this map, and it identified all of the Salt Marsh restoration projects, and only very few, or maybe 2, that were Wabanaki led. And so if there's a objective of this new network to have more indigenous led projects, restoration projects, well, I guess that's the question. Is that an objective? And 2, I would encourage you to think about how the network provides enabling conditions for making that possible. And I'm really excited for you, because I think the network approach is the approach that can really facilitate that. You could do pretty much I don't want to say you could do anything you want, but almost anything you want within that context. So I'm just excited for you. But maybe just answer that. It's like, is that an objective to have Indigenous-led projects? Co-management, I understand, but I'm talking about Indigenous-led. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, no, it was Mail's one? So Bruce is Jen's husband, and he runs one of those projects you just pointed to. Yeah.
So I guess, like, is it all right for me to just plug these guys? Because this is an amazing group of human beings you have on your stage. I just want to let you know they're giants in our area. And basically, that's all I want to do is I work for Sipayik Environmental Department. I'm the Coastal Wetlands Manager for the Passamaquoddy tribe at Sipayik. When I first took that job, I transferred over from commercial fishing. And one thing we're focusing on is restoration and all these efforts. And what came out of it was this movement for, developing ideas for health. Well, we didn't have at the tribe the tools for assessing health other than, which is a major tool, the teak, the actual knowledge. Look, our marsh isn't doing good. But I was able to link up with Tatia, which she set us up with John Woodruff from UMass, and that led to meeting up with Beverly Johnson from Bates College, and they're leaders in sedimentology and core processing. What I'm trying to do here is just give a kind of like a quick, like the power of this group here. So this came to me forming a small, like a group focused on just core sampling. Bates offered to give us the ability to set up a lab. So because of their partnership and what they have going on here, now at Sipayik, we have the beginning of the first core sampling lab in Indian country. And this is an outreach. This is something that came from these people sitting on the stage. So I just want to tell you guys thank you. It's amazing what you're doing. The work, keep it going. It really helps our community, and it has this really powerful, you know what I mean? So, all right, cool.
I do want to answer the question about co-lead or lead, right? So I think we're open to lead, co-lead, but that's a part of our partnership and relationship building, right? We can't say how many people are going to lead that if Wabanaki people aren't making those decisions. So I think that's about the relationship building and sort of building that commitment to the work. I work with like 17 sweetgrass harvesters, and they are interested in leading sweetgrass harvest, like a restoration project. So I think it can spread. Yeah.
Hi, thanks again, you guys. I'm Simon. I'm from Halifax, Jabuktuk with the Ecology Action Center. And I find this so exciting because we've been dealing with eelgrass permitting situation in Nova Scotia where some Mi'kmaq communities, they want to restore some of these habitats, but they can't get permission through like provincial permitting systems. And if I understood correctly, I think you said that you kind of just like threw the cultural use permit in the bin. Like, did I? Is that, or how did this come to be? Like what?
Yeah.
Like the permission structure, that used to be in place that you seem to have kind of overcome here. Like, and just that, I find that really cool.
I think through relationships, through First Light Learning Journey, and having conservation organizations understand that like easements and the tools that they use often inhibit Indigenous access and rights. And so that pushback in education allowed them to really just more or less codify the rights they already give citizens. Like access is, harvesting already happens on some of these landscapes by other people. So for our state of Maine, we highlight like hunting is one, right? So like some recreation ideas are already allowed in these spaces. So it was really just sort of highlighting what Indigenous access looks like and saying that we commit to not, to giving safe environments. So to know that they're gonna educate stewards and the people who steward that landscape to not create negative environments for us while we're harvesting. So it was through their organization, but it took time. It took years to get it to the board, to move organizations past just the steward or the one person. How do you create real change? It takes a lot of time.
I'll echo the thanks for the terrific and once again inspiring presentation. And I guess I have a question about geographic scope, recognizing the ambition and the sort of groundbreaking work that you're doing and, within the scale that you're operating at right now. But I'm wondering, and this is maybe picking up a little bit on where Simon was going, is there dialogue happening with colleagues, Indigenous and non-Native, outside the footprint of where you're working in what's known in Western terms as Maine, to the north and east and also to the south, where in other salt marsh areas? And if there are things, it just seems like incredible work that you're doing that can be shared and expanding the model, but also learning in both directions. Just curious about that, not knowing anything about it before what you've shared. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry. Do you have somebody? Go first.
Well, I don't, we could all answer.
Okay.
You want to use the microphone?
Yeah.
I feel like my thoughts are going in so many different directions, but I know within our Marsh network we have some folks that come from Massachusetts and New Hampshire, and we've had people in New Hampshire, for example, reach out and say like, hey, we like maybe have some funding, we want to include like Wabanaki engagement in our project. Can you help us with that? But we don't have any people to engage with, but they're located, a 5-hour drive from where the Wabanaki communities are. And so that's been identified as a problem. We haven't had, that's not a piece that we've figured out how to manage, but that's like one of the problems we have identified as a group. I think also today these presentations are kind of opening my eyes to how much we have to learn across our border to the north or to the northeast, and I'm realizing how little I know about what is happening just across the border. And maybe there are some relationships already established through a group that I'm unaware of, but it's really opening my eyes to seeing how much we can learn from our neighbors. Should I answer more?
I have a little bit of relationships. Been in conversation with an ecologist. I don't know who she's working with in Nova Scotia around sweetgrass restoration and salt marsh restoration in general. We just talk more about sweetgrass ecology. The same thing for somebody, Lenape-Hoking, similar kind of work. There's questions around more like, where can I find the sweetgrass that's good for harvesting? And that's, if a Native person asks me that question, I'll tell them. And then if a non-Native person asks me that question, I say, why don't you work with Native people in your organization near you? So there's a lot of that kind of, like trying to push them to build the relationships with people near them.
I'll also add that, the idea of co-management and the idea of non-Indigenous conservation organizations making management decisions daily, regularly throughout, the world is really common. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities for not only like the Marsh network to share lessons, but then also there's a Maine Land Trust network as well. So the idea of lessons learned from our work together, spreading out to non-salt marsh environments is a really big opportunity that I'm looking forward to in the future.
There's also a freshwater sweetgrass that a lot of Wabanaki people harvest. So up near Nugukuk or Wolastoqey territory, they harvest freshwater sweetgrass. So there's differences in how we harvest and where we harvest.
I actually want to say something. As you see, Suzanne's trying to take off and hide. But as you can see, this is a woman-run group. I'm just the bug that hangs around these amazing women. And from our culture, the women run the way and they lead the way. So thank you, ladies, for involving me, and Niawen for allowing us into your territory.